The afternoon sun hung low over Praça do Comércio, wrapping the plaza in a golden warmth that felt almost unreal against the chill of the wine in my hand. I was leaning against a cafe railing, watching tourists drift past and street musicians tune their guitars, when my phone exploded with sound. Amber's name flashed across the screen, and before I could even say hello, her voice came through in a hysterical scream. She wasn't crying, she was panicking. "They're calling the police!" she shrieked. "There are strangers in my condo!" I didn't need to ask what she meant. I already knew. 2 weeks earlier, I had quietly sold my apartment, and somehow she had decided to move herself and her boyfriend into it anyway, using the emergency key my parents still had, the one meant for fires or floods, not convenience. I didn't gasp. I didn't apologize. I took another calm sip of my Vinho Verde and stared out at the sunlit plaza, feeling strangely steady. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I love knowing who's part of this community. But to understand why I wasn't panicking, why my heart wasn't racing, you have to understand where I came from. You have to understand the architecture of guilt I lived inside for 32 years. I grew up in Seattle, where the rain doesn't just fall, it seeps. It seeps into sidewalks, into windowsills, into moods, until everything feels heavier than it should. My childhood felt exactly the same way. My parents, Jeffrey and Holly, didn't build a home rooted in warmth or softness. They built a system based on usefulness. In that system, I wasn't really a daughter. I was infrastructure. I was the beam holding up the ceiling so my younger sister, Amber, could dance freely underneath it. I was the safety net that made everyone else comfortable taking risks because they knew I'd absorbed the fall. They called it family responsibility. I called it emotional conscription. The imbalance wasn't subtle or hidden. It was parked in the driveway. On Amber's 16th birthday, she got a brand new crossover SUV. Not used, not discounted, brand new. I remember the price. $36,000, because the paperwork sat on the kitchen counter while I was packing my lunch in silence. When I turned 16, my dad handed me a bus schedule and a lecture about environmental responsibility and the dangers of unnecessary driving. He said it was character building. Apparently, Amber's character was already built. The pattern didn't stop there. Amber got private tutors, SAT prep courses that cost thousands, and eventually tuition at private liberal arts college that totaled over $200,000 across 4 years. My parents paid every cent without hesitation. They said they were investing in her potential. For me, they said they were investing in my resilience. I worked 3 jobs through college. Grocery store nights, campus library shifts, freelance design work whenever I could squeeze it in. I slept 4 hours a night and ran on caffeine and stubbornness. When I graduated with honors, my parents didn't throw a party. They said, "Lauren is so low maintenance." That was their favorite compliment. Lauren doesn't need much, Lauren doesn't complain, Lauren doesn't ask, Lauren doesn't need us. They were right about one thing. I didn't need them. But they desperately needed me. By my late 20s, I'd become a UX researcher, a job focused on analyzing human behavior, identifying broken systems, and optimizing patterns that no longer worked. Naturally, I turned that lens inward. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't a daughter. I was a diversified portfolio. I was the emergency fund, the credit line, the insurance policy. I was the invisible safety net that made everyone else comfortable being reckless because I was always there to absorb the consequences. Amber didn't need to plan because I would rescue her. My parents didn't need boundaries because I didn't enforce them. Crises didn't need prevention because I specialized in cleanup. Then came the condo, my condo. 2 years earlier, I'd bought a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Puget Sound that cost me nearly every bonus and stock option I'd earned in a decade of grinding. It was my sanctuary, the first thing in my life that felt truly mine. But the moment my parents walked in for the housewarming, I saw the look in their eyes. They weren't admiring the space, they were evaluating an asset. My mother ran her fingers along the quartz countertops and said, "This is a lot of room for just one person, Lauren. Almost wasteful, don't you think?" My father stepped onto the balcony, looked out at the view, and nodded thoughtfully. "This is a good investment. It's nice knowing we have something like this in the family." We, not me. They didn't see my name on the deed. They saw Amber's future guest room. They saw a fallback option if Jeffrey's business ever had a bad quarter. They saw liquidity. They saw utility. They saw a resource. And in my family, resources were meant to be used. So when I got a job offer from Lisbon, excitement wasn't my first emotion. Panic was, because I knew exactly what would happen. If I left that condo empty, even for a week, my parents would suggest Amber house it. Within days, she'd be rearranging furniture, inviting friends, and quietly turning my sanctuary into her crash pad. Somehow, I'd end up paying HOA fees from across the Atlantic while she hosted parties I wasn't invited to. The guilt wasn't abstract. It was physical, heavy, crushing. The feeling that everything I earned belonged to the family, and keeping anything for myself was selfish, unnatural, even cruel. That's when it hit me. The guilt wasn't love, it was architecture. Brick by brick, they'd built a cage around me, one where the bars were obligation, silence, and praise for being low maintenance. And I realized something else. You don't escape a cage like that by unlocking the door. You escape by demolishing the building. The Lisbon offer wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. But instead of celebrating, my first thoughts were, who will pay Amber's rent if I leave? Who will handle my parents' tech support calls? Who will clean up the messes? That panic became my wake-up call. I sat in my ergonomic office chair, staring at Seattle's gray skyline, and ran the simulation. Professionally, clinically. My competence hadn't saved my family. It had crippled them. By fixing every crisis, paying every bill, and absorbing every consequence, I'd created a vacuum of responsibility. I'd made helplessness convenient. I'd made dependency profitable. Amber wasn't just entitled, she was underdeveloped. My parents weren't just overwhelmed, they were enablers who had outsourced adulthood to their eldest daughter. And I knew exactly how the conversation would go if I told them about Lisbon. They'd beg me to keep the condo just in case. They'd insist Amber needed stability. They'd guilt me into letting her stay temporarily, and temporary in my family meant permanent. I also knew myself. If they pushed hard enough, the old architecture would activate and I would cave. So I didn't tell them. I chose silence. A discreet real estate agent listed the condo off-market. I boxed my life in the evenings under the guise of decluttering. Every question about my plans got vague answers. "I hired a property management company," I said casually over Sunday dinner. "They'll rent it to corporate clients. Strict lease, no family allowed." My mother frowned. "That sounds so impersonal. Strangers in your home." "It pays the mortgage," I said evenly. 2 weeks before my flight, I sat across from the Coopers at a long mahogany table. They were young, both architects, glowing with excitement. They talked about nursery colors and dinner parties and building a future in that space. They didn't see an asset. They saw a home. I signed the papers, handed over the keys, and felt something detach from my chest that I hadn't even realized was there. It wasn't just a sale, it was an amputation. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Amber. I boarded the plane to Lisbon with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket, leaving behind a ghost house that no longer belonged to me. I thought I'd outsmarted them. I didn't realize how desperate they were to be needed. Back in the plaza, Amber's screaming dissolved into sobs. "They're saying it's trespassing," she cried. "Mom and Dad said I could stay." "They're calling the police?" I repeated calmly. "Good." "What?" she shrieked. "Let them," I said. "I'll handle it." I hung up and dialed Ryan Cooper, the man who'd bought my condo. He answered immediately, voice tight with adrenaline. "I'm so sorry, Miss Wallace," he said. "Your sister is screaming at my wife that this is her house. The police are 5 minutes away." Put me on speaker, I said. I heard movement, then Amber's voice burst through the phone. You can't kick me out. Mom and Dad said I could stay here. Lauren said it was okay. I never said that, I replied calmly, projecting into a living room 4,000 miles away. Silence. Lauren, she whispered. Tell them. Amber, I said. Mom and Dad don't own that condo. I did, and I sold it. You're trespassing. Sirens wailed faintly in the background. Mr. Cooper, I continued, the officer will need a statement. Please tell them I confirm the sale and that no one in my family has permission to be on the premises. If she refuses to leave, you have my full support to press charges. Lauren! Amber shrieked. Mom and Dad are going to kill you. They can try, I said. Put the officer on when they arrive. For the next 20 minutes, I facilitated my sister's eviction from another continent. I listened as the officer reviewed the deed, explained her options, and gave her two choices: leave voluntarily or leave in handcuffs. I heard the defeat in her voice when she chose the former. When the line finally went dead, I didn't cry. My emotions felt locked in a vault. I ordered another glass of wine. The sun was setting over the Tagus River, turning the water molten gold. And for the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar. Lightness, like a bridge finally burning behind me. But the fire wasn't finished. My phone lit up again. Incoming video call. Dad. I leaned back in my cafe chair and accepted. My parents appeared on the screen, sitting shoulder to shoulder on their beige sectional. Amber was squeezed between them, her face blotchy, clutching tissues like props in a performance of victimhood. They looked like a panel of righteous indignation. Lauren, my father barked, we demand an explanation. I think you're confused, I said calmly. I'm not the one who broke into someone else's house. Don't play games, my mother snapped. You set a trap. You let us believe that condo was available. You humiliated your sister. She had to leave in a police cruiser, Amber wailed. Do you know how traumatic that was? Traumatic, I repeated, is finding strangers in your living room. Traumatic is being arrested for trespassing. Amber is lucky the Coopers decided not to press charges, which, by the way, was my doing. You should have told us, Amber cried. You knew I needed a place. I sold my property because I'm moving to another continent, I said evenly. It wasn't about you. We're family, my father shouted. Family helps family. That condo was a resource. You had a duty to share it. I really looked at them then. They weren't hurt. They were furious that their resource had disappeared, that the ATM had stopped dispensing cash. Let me be clear, I said, shifting into the calm, professional tone that had carried me through years of negotiations. I didn't owe you that house. I didn't owe you a warning, and I certainly don't owe you an apology. Silence. What I am going to do, I continued, is send you an invoice. A what? My mother gasped. An invoice, I said, for the emergency locksmith the Coopers hired after Amber jammed the lock, for the professional cleaning crew they needed after you tracked mud through their foyer, and for the 3 nights at the hotel I just booked for Amber, which is the last financial assistance you will ever receive from me. You wouldn't dare, my father growled. Check your email, I said. I just hit send. Then I ended the call. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just fired my parents. I ordered another glass of wine. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. My email pinged again. This time, it wasn't my parents. It was my former boss in Seattle, marked urgent. My stomach sank as I opened it. Lauren, it read, we need to talk. The new owners of your condo, Ryan Cooper, is the CFO of Pinnacle Group, our biggest client, and your father's biggest client. The world tilted. This wasn't just a family crisis anymore. This was professional fallout. The Coopers weren't random strangers. They were the people who signed my father's paychecks, and his daughter had just invaded their home. The war hadn't escalated. It had detonated. Ryan Cooper wasn't just a client. He was the CFO of Pinnacle Group, a conglomerate responsible for nearly 40% of my father's boutique consulting firm's revenue. Jeffrey had spent 15 years cultivating that relationship. He golfed with Ryan, sent expensive scotch every Christmas, built trust brick by brick. And now his daughter had broken into Ryan's home. The police report had already been filed. The story wasn't just neighborhood gossip, it was professional currency. And in Seattle's tight-knit business ecosystem, reputation was everything. My phone rang. Dad. I stared at the screen, stunned by how violently the power dynamic had shifted. For 32 years, I'd been the one begging for crumbs of approval. Now I held the only thing that could save him. I answered. "Lauren," he said, his voice stripped of bluster and trembling with panic. "You have to help me. Ryan called. He's pulling the account. Says he can't trust a man whose family doesn't respect boundaries or property law." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said calmly. "You have to fix this," he begged. "Write him a letter. Say it was a misunderstanding. Say you gave Amber permission but forgot to tell him. Say anything. Just take the blame, Lauren, please." "If I lose this account," he whispered, "the firm goes under. We lose everything." I sat in silence, listening to his desperate breathing. He was asking me to lie. He was asking me to destroy my own professional credibility, to paint myself as careless and unreliable so he wouldn't face consequences for his entitlement. He was asking me to set myself on fire to keep him warm. And for a moment, the old architecture trembled. The habit of saving them was deep, automatic. "It's just a letter," a voice whispered. "It would fix everything." Then I looked out at the Lisbon skyline and thought about the vacuum of competence. If I fixed this, nothing would change. They wouldn't learn, they wouldn't grow, they'd just wait for the next crisis and expect me to solve it. "Dad," I said softly, "do you remember when I was 12 and asked you for money for the science fair?" "Lauren, please." "You told me failure was the best teacher. This is your lesson." "This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," I said. "I won't lie for you. I won't take the blame for Amber's crime or your enabling. This is what happens when you treat people like resources instead of humans. You lose them." "You're being selfish," he shouted. "Yes," I said, and the word tasted like honey. "I am. I'm preserving myself, and for the first time in my life, I'm happy." Then I hung up. I blocked his number. I blocked my mother. I blocked Amber. The sun slipped below the horizon, washing Lisbon in twilight. I had just destroyed my father's business. I had just severed ties with my entire family, and I had never felt more alive. "Dad," I said softly, "do you remember when I was 12 and asked you for money for the science fair?" "Lauren, please." "You told me failure was the best teacher," I continued. "This is your lesson." "This isn't the time." "This is exactly the time," I said. "I won't lie for you. I won't take the blame for Amber's crime or your enabling. This is what happens when you treat people like resources instead of humans. You lose them." "You're being selfish," he shouted. "Yes," I said, and the word tasted like honey. "I am. I'm preserving myself. And for the first time in my life, I'm happy." Then I hung up. I blocked his number. I blocked my mother. I blocked Amber. The sun slipped below the horizon, washing Lisbon in twilight. I had just destroyed my father's business. I had just severed ties with my entire family. And I had never felt more alive. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence. No calls, no emails, no surprise emergencies, no emotional hostage situations. I didn't block them to punish them. I blocked them to protect the peace I had finally built. But the world is small, and news travels, even across oceans. Through a former colleague on LinkedIn, I learned what happened. Ryan Cooper didn't just pull the Pinnacle account, he told his network why. And in business, trust is currency. My father's firm lost nearly half its revenue overnight. The fallout forced restructuring, layoffs, and a total lifestyle downgrade. And that had the exact effect I predicted. Without the family war chest, Amber's subsidy dried up. No more rent payments, no more bailouts, no more rescue missions. Last week, I saw a status update from a mutual cousin. Amber has a job, a real one. She's working as a receptionist at a dental office in Bellevue. It isn't glamorous. It isn't the six-figure salary she felt entitled to, but it's hers. The vacuum of competence worked. By removing myself, by refusing to be the crutch, I forced them to learn how to walk. It wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. They're struggling, yes, probably miserable, almost certainly blaming me, but they're functioning. They're surviving, and they're no longer cannibalizing me to do it. I sit now at a small iron cafe table in the Alfama district. The air smells like salt and grilled sardines. A waiter places a pastel de nata and a bica, strong espresso, in front of me. I bite into the pastry, the custard warm and sweet, flakes sticking to my lips. I'm alone. No emergency contacts in my phone, no family holidays on my calendar, no one calling me to fix their printer or cover their rent. For 32 years, I thought this kind of solitude would feel like punishment. I thought it would feel like failure. Instead, I watched the yellow tram rattle down a steep cobblestone street against the blue sky and realize what it actually feels like. Victory. It feels like the first full breath after stepping out of a room that was slowly running out of oxygen. I didn't just survive my family. I outgrew them. I built a life that fits me, not a storage unit for their expectations. I sip my coffee. It's bitter and perfect. I am selfish. I am solitary. I am free. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to stop yourself from crossing back over it, hit that like button. Share this with the responsible one in your life who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself. Thanks for listening.